Today's episode is going to be a little bit interesting. We're going to be having a look at some multi-tools that I have and comparing them. These are currently available on the market. Others have been available in the past, and still further others will be available in the future, but these are available now. And they're kind of interesting because I think they have a good place or a good justification for having a place in something like a 72-hour or bug out bag or some other sort of survival kit, because these particular multi-tools are designed to harvest food out of the environment. They are built around the concept of being part multi-tool, which is part knife, and part slingshot. Stay tuned. So what we have here are three different models, which we'll have a quick look at. I have this here just to give you an idea of scale. This little Ziploc bag has 38 caliber or 9mm steel shot. It takes up remarkably little space, remarkably little weight, and that's one of the advantages of a slingshot. Because the ammunition doesn't take up much space or weight, you can carry a decent quantity without having to put yourself out too much. Another thing as well is that this ammunition is silent, so you're not going to make a big bang as a firearm would provide, which means you're not going to frighten game away. And so harvesting small game from the environment in an emergency situation is a practical application that you can use something like one of these tools for, and not expensively compared to rather a lot of other alternatives, and not noisily, not drawing unwanted attention to yourself, and also not having to run afoul. If you live someplace where the legislation is strict, then as regards firearms, generally speaking, slingshots do not get caught up in that. As a result, it's a much more simple option that doesn't take up a lot of space, doesn't take up a lot of weight, and in the case of these multi-tools, offers you a fairly interesting possibility for how to carry a means by which you can harvest small game out of the environment. So we're going to look at these one at a time. Now this particular one comes in a polyurethane simulated leather sheath, and it has a slingshot attachment which is kind of separate. It's essentially a fairly conventional looking locking knife. It has a Tanto style blade, stainless steel, and it is a liner lock. On this end you have a glass breaker with a little button here, and if I press the button it'll release the glass breaker, which is otherwise locked into place, and I can place the slingshot attachment in, press the button again to lock it in, and there we go. Now, it so happens I'm a big advocate of safety, so I'm going to actually put these safety glasses on. These are a wire mesh, and I'm going to just demonstrate the normal usage. So it has a draw about as long as my arm. It's not the most powerful elastic, and we're just going to see how powerful that is, because you need to understand that this kind of slingshot, which is not one-piece construction, as a lot of normal slingshots are, you don't want the heavy elastic that some of the more typical hunting slingshots would actually have on them. If I pull this back to full draw, I'm now looking at, so that was about 10 pounds of pull. It's not as heavy a draw, as a lot of other slingshots. But you don't want it to be too heavy because, to be fair, this having a part here, I just press that button, this has come out. If I'm holding, even assuming this doesn't break, if I'm holding this slingshot and I accidentally press the button, that could fly into your face at quite a rate of knots, which is of course one of the good reasons why wearing the safety glasses or safety goggles would be highly recommended. The other thing as well with a slingshot, and this is true for all slingshots, because the elastic can at some point break, it could snap into your eye and cause damage. And if you're in the field, and if it's an emergency situation to begin with, that's the last thing you want. So yeah, some kind of safety glasses, highly recommended. What I will say about this one, you can actually leave the slingshot in place while using it as a knife. This only has these three features. You have the slingshot, you have the glass breaker, which is normally in there when you don't want the slingshot attached to it. You have your knife with the liner lock. It does have a belt clip, so you don't necessarily need to be using the sheath that it comes with, which is, in my opinion, not a great sheath. I don't really like PU leather, but it is what it is. However, as a tool, this one has the virtue of being particularly inexpensive. It was around about the 20-ish pound region, which is not very expensive at all. That would be about $25 or $30, well, less than $30, maybe $25, $26, something like that. It varies in price from day to day, time of year, whether or not there's a sale on, but that's the sort of region you're looking at. Not expensive, a fairly ordinary lock knife, really, but with that interesting slingshot feature. Let's have a look at the next one. This next one is actually made, as you can see, by Nextool, and they do make rather a lot of multi-tools, and this is their slingshot version. Comes with a few interesting bits and pieces, including these. Now, these pellets, and I would say there's probably a couple of dozen in there, are actually made out of mud. And these are basically just practice ammunition, which they provide with it. When this hits something hard, they're basically, as I say, they're made out of mud. They kind of more or less explode, and they don't actually pollute the environment. It's just, turns back into soil. This is the actual rubber for the slingshot, which it comes with. So, again, fairly straightforward, not very heavyweight, but again, for folding ones, they shouldn't be. This does actually come with a bit of plastic here, which we'll get rid of. Now you have, again, two aspects. A knife, which if I open that up, is just almost a straight edge, slightly hollow ground, stainless steel. Quite interesting that it does not, it is a liner lock, but not a conventional one, because I can close this to about a third of the way closed before it engages with the liner lock, which then has to be moved out of the way to close it the rest of the way. This is a fairly short blade, and it has this very unusual style of liner lock, and I suspect that it was made deliberately to overcome some of the limitations of, for example, UK knife law, where this is a shorter blade, so it's within the length that's legal to carry. And it does not lock in the open position, but it does have the safety feature so it can't trap your fingers by accident. How well that would hold up in court, I'm not sure. I think it would probably be fine, to be fair. But again, I wouldn't recommend necessarily walking around with that in public. But not necessarily too bad. And it has the belt clip again. On this side, we have that button on the bottom, which, as you can see, and there's a button on the top. So these are spring-loaded, and if I press the button, if I press it hard, they both pop up at more or less the same moment. They lock into place, and I have to press the button on the top to release them. If I let go, as you can see, they are spring-loaded. But when you push them in, it's all very compact. And then once you have it open, you would then proceed to attach your rubber. I would say that the side with the clip should face you, the side with the logo should face out. And it just attaches fairly easily. You have a little channel here. So once you put your rubber around the arm, you just pull to make it thin and then slide it through the channel, and now you have your slingshot ready to go. So there are features of this that I like. The fact that you don't have a removable slingshot, that it's integral, is quite nice. The fact that it deploys very easily, again, quite nice. Again, you have a relatively lightweight elastic on this. Obviously, we're going to put the safety glasses on first. Again, similar sort of draw length. And let's see how the weight stacks up compared to our last example. Now, this one's a bit stronger. This is about, I would say about, yeah, that's much more along the lines of about 13, 14 pounds of draw weight. So this is actually a stronger elastic, but again, you don't want a really heavy elastic because, again, you have hinges here, there are moving parts. You don't want to put too much stress and strain on it, or you could have something break on you. The one thing I'm not crazy about, that channel that it has in order to get the elastic on and off. And if I take it off for a second, I'm going to pull the elastic to make it as thin as possible. We're going to try and find the channel and work our way underneath, and out it comes. And again, that's a little potentially more destructive than putting it on, which is easier. Again, putting it on, once you have everything in the correct way around, you just pull it on there, pull tight, it'll pop in very easily. I would say, because you are removing the elastic when you're putting it away, you're going to abrade the elastic, and so again, there's a greater possibility of the elastic failing and breaking. But because of the nature of the carry case it comes with, I mean, you have a nice compartment there for the tool itself, and then space for ammunition, the main elastic, and to be fair, if you get a spare elastic, you can have two elastics in here, so you have your elastic, a spare elastic, and some ammunition. So it's fairly well thought out, that case, and it's about, well, it's actually smaller than an eyeglass case. It will easily fit in a pocket. So that's not bad. It won't fit on your belt, but if you really want to fit something on your belt, you do have the belt clip on the tool itself. And of course, if you are in the field and you're looking for some small game to harvest, you can leave the elastic on it while it's clipped to your belt. The elastic will just hang down, it'll dangle, and as long as you have ready access to your ammunition, you can certainly, go out into the field in that configuration. So that's actually not bad. The blade on it is small, but the locking mechanism is designed to not contravene legislation where having a knife that locks in the open position might be forbidden. So, but it does have the safety feature to prevent it from accidentally closing on your hand. That said, with the knife blade of this design, where that's blunt and there's just a long straight edge here, you're only ever going to use this for slicing anyway. The chances of it closing on your fingers are pretty much nil. And in my opinion, they could have dispensed with the liner lock function altogether, and that would have probably been better. But it's an interesting safety feature, and I think for some other liner locks that you might want to carry in places where there are restrictions on locking blades, that might actually not be such a bad idea. Let's have a look at our last one. Oh, price-wise, similar to our last one. Depending on, I'm going to say, where and when you're shopping, and all of these came from AliExpress, by the way, you're looking between sort of 20 and 30 pounds, between 20 and $30, that kind of region. But our last one that we're going to look at, to be fair, a little bit more expensive, but then also a little more sophisticated. Let's have a look. Our final example is probably my favorite. Comes in a Ghidorah case, Velcro seal. When it first arrives, it comes in a little bit of cellophane, but this is basically it, the Sniper Eagle. It also comes, again, with an elastic. The Sniper Eagle is kind of cool looking, but it is not, in fact, the most ergonomic design. However, it has slightly more by way of blades, as it were. To begin with, you have the main blade, which, again, stainless steel, nothing too fancy, just a sort of standard spear point. And that's actually intended really more for processing wood than game. It is a liner lock, so obviously where liner lock restrictions exist, that's something to be considered. It doesn't have a thumb bit, so you have to sort of start it off like so. It is in theory possible to flip it all the way open if you do it fast enough. And so that's the main blade. And then on this side, we have a button in this position, and you have the two parts for the slingshot. So you need to press the button in to release the catch, and when it's fully open, it locks, and to close it, you have to press that button again, and it will fold down. And on this particular one, unlike our next tool, you do have a simple gap, so it's not going to be quite so difficult when getting your elastic in there to avoid abrading. This does come with these two bits of silicone, and you may wonder what they are for. Well, let's show you. Again, you're going to hold it. You have, again, a belt clip here, so belt clip side facing you, logo facing away if you're going to be using the slingshot. Again, we just do the pull it on method. So get that in position, pull so it flattens, and it just pops on. These elastic, the elastic is just put into place, and then you can put the silicone into place to help lock everything in position. I'm not convinced that's entirely necessary, but it comes with it, and you can do it, and it does keep everything nicely in position. Now, before I actually show you other bits about this, I'm going to show you its two other blades. And what I'm going to do, first of all, is take this out. We'll put them back in a moment. Removing this is much simpler because it doesn't have that spiral. So it's easier to take it out without unduly abrading that elastic. And I'm just going to close the slingshot arms and come to the other side. Now there's a button here, and there's a blade here and a blade here, and they're controlled by that button. So if I press this button, it will release the blade. It won't open unless I press that button. Now, as soon as it's fully open, it locks. And what we have here is a push-pull saw blade, wood saw, extremely sharp and extremely well made. And this will allow you to process a small amount of wood, cutting it off for getting your fire going, which if you are harvesting food, you're going to want to cook it. So that's actually quite helpful. So you have this as well as, I won't even close that for a second, as well as the main blade. So you have this blade and that saw for processing wood, which will help you to actually, if I press this in, I can then close that. So it's not just about catching the food, it's also about preparing the wood so that you can actually cook it. Of course, you have to process the game as well. So for that, we have this blade here. And my cat is very interested. Okay, now she's wandering off. So if I press this button again, I'm able to open this blade. Now this is a skinning blade, and you have a gutting hook on the end. So it's a very thin, long blade, which is good for filleting and actually preparing meat. Whether you're dealing with small mammals, small birds, or even fish, this is a good blade. And as for this gutting hook, well, I can tell you from experience, having used this gutting hook previously on a squirrel that I harvested and skinned, it opened it up like a zipper. Once you actually create a small hole to get the end of the hook in, you're able to just draw it along. It opens the body without actually damaging the internal organs so that you're able to not have contaminated meat. So as a meat processing blade, that one is excellent. So this is really intended for processing food, with the other larger blade intended to process wood. I will tell you this button's quite stiff, and while these two blades always arrive sharp, I will say that the main blade, while sharp, could be a little bit better. But this just needs a little bit of tuning. To be fair, I never use a knife in the field until I've personally sharpened it, so I have the edge that I like. But with just a little bit of a trim, this is going to be a decent blade for feather sticking and so forth. And again, we can turn this into the slingshot function very, very easily and very quickly, just by popping that on there and there, like so. And then we're going to add our silicon, and we are now good to go. So we're going to test this to see the draw weight of the elastic at full draw, which is a slightly longer draw, to be fair. And again, we're up to about 13 pounds. So they're all fairly similar. To be fair, you could probably go up in draw weight a little bit. I would say if you had 15 or 16 pounds draw weight, that would be fine. I wouldn't recommend any really heavy elastic. This is not a wrist rocket, for example. One of the consequences of this, I have to say, is that if you are planning on hunting with this, your range is going to be reduced compared to a more conventional hunting slingshot. Now, I will say, if you are harvesting food from the environment, in other words, you're hunting, there's a very important piece of advice I would give you, and that is be competent, know what you're doing. Now, by that I mean be able to hit the target. Because with a slingshot like this, especially one with this sort of power level, you are not going to get a clean kill if you're using a body shot. You are going to have to, we're talking about very small animals, something the size of a squirrel, a pigeon, a grouse, that sort of thing, a pheasant perhaps. You are going to be having to do a headshot, which means that you need to be able to hit a target consistently. 9 times out of 10, the size of a ping pong ball. Now, I would recommend thinking in terms, with tools like this, of hunting distances of 10 paces plus or minus 5 paces, so 5 to 15 paces. I think anything longer than that, you need a more powerful slingshot. And this isn't going to be that. I think, however, unless you can hit a target the size of a ping pong ball from a greater distance than, say, 15 paces, you shouldn't be even attempting it, because you're more likely to harm an animal, wound it, and not properly kill it, which is a waste of ammunition. It's cruel, unnecessary, and you're not even getting any food out of it in the end, so it's pointless. So if you are going to have a tool like this, you really do need to think in terms of practicing with it on a regular basis until, from a range of 5, 10, perhaps 15 paces, you can consistently hit a target the size of a ping pong ball or smaller. If you can't hit that target, don't think in terms of harvesting food with this. If you can, however, it is a useful tool, particularly in an emergency. I'm not talking about advocating for hunting all the time. I do actually enjoy hunting occasionally, but I'm not advocating for it. I'm strictly talking about emergency use with these tools. And with these tools, you have a limited range, limited power, and so you really need to think in terms of quite small game, where that one animal that you harvest is going to provide you with that day's food, at least in terms of meat. And you really do need to have a bit of precision about being able to use this effectively, or you shouldn't be doing it. So those 2 points. Practice until you're good enough at it to be able to reliably and consistently hit a target the size of a ping pong ball or smaller. Possess and use safety glasses or safety goggles of some description that will protect your eyes in case an elastic snaps. And be safe. I hope you found this interesting, and hopefully a little later on, down the road, over the next coming however long, I will perhaps try and have a video where I show you how we can actually use these in target practice. They are interesting tools. The Sniper Eagle, which again, it looks cool. It's not the most ergonomic handle, so there is that. Be warned, it looks cooler than it, it doesn't feel as comfortable. I mean, if it's a choice between looking cool and feeling comfortable, personally, I prefer feeling comfortable, but they opted the other way around. But it is a really great tool, and it is something I keep in my bug-out bag, along with ammunition. If you are thinking seriously about hunting, you may actually purchase, again, this sort of, I would say 9mm steel shots. Excellent, excellent choice. If you are seriously thinking of taking up hunting with a slingshot, you might want to get to the point where you have tools like these, so you can manufacture your own bullets. This is used for melting lead and pouring it into this bullet mold, which is around about a 39 caliber, or 39.5 caliber bullet, another about 10mm. 10mm lead is, with a powerful slingshot, probably the best slingshot ammunition there is, but that's just my opinion, and a lot of other people who hunt with slingshots. But in any event, having that kind of technology, that's a bit more advanced, and that's for another video. But that was a little taster. In any event, yeah, tools like this, very useful. The Sniper Eagle, be prepared to pay some serious money for. A few years ago, they were a little less. At the moment, they're a little bit more. The price, again, goes up and down a little bit. They are still available. You need to think in terms of plus or minus 20, spending around about 100. Don't forget, you also have to pay import duties, taxes, transportation fees, postage, and packaging, and all that good junk. So by the time you're done, you could be, if you're lucky, if you can get one for as little as 80, you've done extremely well. More likely to be 120, 130, or somewhere in that vicinity. But they're kind of nice, and I don't regret owning one. I hope you found that interesting, and I hope that if you are considering getting one of these, you find this video helpful. Please click like if you like this, and subscribe, and click the bell icon so you'll know when my next video drops. Have a good one.